He is risen. You guys are so good. All right. Hey, let's go ahead and pray together, and we're going to get underway. Jesus, I thank you for today, and I pray that today is more than just a memorial. I pray that we would approach the reality of this day in a profound way, a personal way, a powerful way, that it wouldn't just merely be something where we come and we remember and we sing and we listen and we leave, but rather it would be a reminder of what we have through you every single day because you have risen. When we say you've risen indeed, it is indeed powerful. It is indeed true. It is indeed transformational for life. And I pray that today would be that day that we are recalibrated to that we remind ourselves and we're reminded by your word all that you've given to us because of this truth. And so we ask that you would, in a very special way, in a very real way, establish this truth in the bedrock of our being. And so we just look to you to do that. We thank you and praise you in your good name. Amen. So today is the day. This is the big day for the Christian tradition and heritage. In fact, there is no day, really, for Christians that is bigger than Resurrection Sunday. Not Christmas, though Christmas is cool. We like Christmas. Kids were probably wishing it was Christmas because they'd wake up to a tree today and have presents. That'd be awesome. And Christmas is cool. But Resurrection Sunday is the premier thing that distinguishes us from almost any other type of faith or religion in the world. It's different. In fact, so different that the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 says, you know what? If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, we're the most pitied of all people. He says, if he didn't rise from the dead, then we're all just sitting around playing patty cake with a make-believe God that doesn't result in anything, and you're still dead in your trespasses and sins, and you should just give up, do your own thing, punch out, pick your own path in life, because if Jesus didn't rise, everything is a lie. That's how certain Paul was that the resurrection is the most important, most critical, most central truth of the Christian faith, that God is not dead, he is surely alive. That is huge. That's why I say it is the big day. This is our Super Bowl spiritually. All right? It's the big one. Now, here's my question for us, though, in light of that. Is this big day big in you? Is this day central to you? And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean to those who may not claim Christ in the room. I mean even those who are claimers of Christ, who believe in Jesus. Has the resurrection penetrated your life in the way that God intends it to do so? In other words, this, is the resurrection in your mind predominantly something that happened in 30-something AD, and it's a piece of history and that's all? Or do you sense that there is some connection to 2016 AD and 30-something AD? Is there something going on between that event and your life and you sense it? Because you should. Because that's a part of what the offer is. It's not just, again, a creed or a code or some thought that we kind of hold up. It's actually an empowered idea. It is a powerful concept. It is a dwelling reality if we begin to understand it. And when you do, it begins to invade and saturate and transform and drive your life in ways that maybe you don't even realize. In fact, in the book of Philippians, there's this interesting little deal. In fact, in 2 weeks, we're going to be starting a series in the book of Philippians, and it's really a series all about joy. It's about joy, which in and of itself, I think that has tremendous value. But it's a series on joy in a context, and so we've titled the series, A Pessimist Guide to Joy. Right? Because there are truths in our lives that are hard to face. There are consequences and circumstances and problems and everything else. And sometimes those rob us of joy, but we're going to learn through the book of Philippians where there is this transcendent joy. And we see this in the life of the Apostle Paul. He's just this guy that exudes joy. And I look at that just personally because I don't always exude joy. That's the real quest for my life in 2016. People have these New Year's resolutions. My resolution wasn't really a resolution, but it was a resolve that says, you know what, I want to know what it means to experience joy all the time, not just in good circumstances, but joy through the bad. And so Philippians makes perfect sense for that. Now, what's interesting, when you look through the book of Philippians, you get to chapter 3, and in chapter 3, there's a section where Paul never speaks to joy or rejoicing. And you go, that's kind of weird. Why there? I mean, there's everywhere else, but in this one section, it's not there. And I believe the reason is because Paul drops the word joy and is just inserting Jesus. Like, he knows that joy really flows from Jesus. So Jesus is the epitome and arc and anchor of joy. And so he's talking about Jesus. And then he says something in this particular section that I think pertains to our resurrection theme today. He says 11 words that have really kind of gripped me for a very long time. And I think they're mystical a little bit. I think they're mysterious. I think they're sometimes hard to really know, how does this play in my life? But it's so central to joy, and it's so central to our day. He says in verse 10, after saying, I just want to know Christ. I don't want to know religion. I don't want to just merely know the rules of a system. He says, I want to know Christ. And in particular, verse 10, he says, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection. That I may know him and the power of his resurrection. Now, you may not notice something here. It's there, but you may not catch it. He's not saying, I want to know the historical account and accuracies of the resurrection of Jesus that happened years before. He's not saying that. And he's not saying, I want to know the future resurrection that's coming one day, though that's going to be true for him as the verses follow through. But right here, what he's saying is, I want to know today. I want to know in my bones, in my being, in my experience, in my life. I want to know the same power that rose Christ from the dead, that death-slaying power. I want that in my life today. He says, that's what I want to know above all else. I think sometimes we lose the fact that resurrection power is offered to God's people today. That the 30-something AD plays out its life today in you and in me as we seek and strive and desire to know that power. That's why I say we're celebrating today more than just a code, more than a creed, more than merely a confession. Paul wasn't satisfied with that. He says, no, I want to sense the life of Christ, that life that was brought into him on Resurrection Sunday. I want to sense that life coursing through my life. I want it infused into my person. I want to experience that on a daily basis in everything I do. What that means is the resurrection isn't just the bookends of the Christian story. It isn't just some piece of history, and it's not some piece of prophetic future. But again, it's a present daily opportunity for us that is given. And that's in part what we want to remember on a day like today, because it's through that, it's through sensing that power that there is hope and joy and peace and purpose and a context for life that is bigger than the context that we're sometimes thrown into. And so to grasp this a little bit, I want to take us back to that first resurrection, and I want to point out some things that I think are interesting for us today. So if you have a Bible, you can open up to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28. We're looking at Matthew 28. The resurrection of Jesus is in all four Gospels. There's different things revealed in different kind of, from different angles and perspectives. But in Matthew 28, there's some things that come out here that I think are really interesting for me. So it starts off in verse 1. And it says, now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. So this is Sunday. So on Friday, Christ was crucified. On Friday, Christ became an accursed thing. On Friday, Christ atoned for sin. On Friday, Christ suffered the penalty of our hell. He suffered the wrath that was destined for us, and he took it to himself. All of that happened on Friday. And now it's gone through the Saturday of kind of just what's next, and now it moves into Sunday. And on that Sunday, we see these two women in this story coming to the tomb. Now, I want to say something really quick. The women of the Passion Week are truly inspirational. If you look at the last week in the life of Jesus, it is the women who shine. They are the human heroes in the story. It is a woman who anoints him for his burial. It is a woman who goes to her husband and says, this man is innocent. I've had dreams. You shouldn't take his life. It was a group of women who were at the cross. It was women who were there when he was pulled from the cross. Women were there when he was put into the tomb. And now women are there again to anoint his body. It is not the men who are sticking around. It's not the men who are courageous. It's not the men who are loyal, it's the women. That in and of itself is a message to be preached. That the women are there, the women are connected, the women are just, they're so ratcheted to him. And so now they're here on that last particular day of what they thought was the future, and now it's just going to be history. Because they're not there in any kind of unique spiritual anticipation. They're there at the tomb of a dead man. They're there to anoint a dead man. This story is over. This liberator, this hope, this possibility, this opportunity is now dead for a number of hours, days. And with that, probably all hopes and aspirations and dreams, right? I mean, that's the setting, right? And so in the early twilight of this day, it is a morning of grief. It is a morning in the emotional fog. If you've ever lost someone that you deeply cared about, you know those first few days, you're just moving from task to task. You don't even know. You're not thinking clearly. You're trying to absorb, is this really real? Are they really gone? Are they just going to walk through the door? No, they're not going to walk through the door. They're really gone. I don't even know what to do. Where am I at right now? What's the next step? I mean, it's all of that. That's these women. Because in their mind, again, all the way along, they're thinking, all right, this is going to end in a capstone of victory. Jesus is going to liberate us. And now it's beginning to sink in. No. The only thing is a headstone of defeat. That's it. It really is over. And when we go to this tomb and we anoint his body, that's the last page in our book. Right? And then we do what? What do we go back to? What do we go do? I mean, all those questions are going to be there. What's great about the story is that as the day begins to dawn, the earth splits and the heavens open up. And it says in verse 2, behold, there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came, and he rolled the stone away, and he sat on it, and his appearance was like lightning, and his clothing was white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. And then the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said, come and see the place where he lay. Now, real quick, I want you to notice a few things that are very particular in Matthew's vocabulary. The first thing is, I want you to see this fact that starts with an idea that you're certain of, that he's dead. He says, but let me amend it. He was dead. Notice that, past tense. He was crucified. Yes, that's true. He really did die. He really did take wrath. He really did go to the cross. He really was dead and buried. He was, past tense. But then the angel flips him out completely and says, but he has risen. He has. Here's the present reality now. Right? And this was according to plan. This was just as he said it would be. That's exactly what it says. That means that the crucifixion of Christ and the resurrection, it wasn't some plan B. It wasn't like, we were going this direction, and then Rome got crazy, and the Jews got crazy, and throws Jesus into this whole problem, and now we're trying to pick up the pieces and go a different direction. It doesn't say that. It says this was always the ultimate epic reveal. It was the ultimate epic reveal. And it's by which, through his death dies. Right? Through his death dies. And in doing so and coming back to life, it isn't just that he has life abundant. And he gives life abundant. It's not just that we are now to live, we're to live fully alive in him. That's exactly what he presents. Even in our life, there's a sense of death at times, and death is certain at the end. But in Jesus' resurrection, everything changes. There is a freshness, there is a spring as he rises. And so this is a huge moment, right? And it's a huge moment, not just because it's going to mean life forevermore, but it's also a huge moment because it's going to bring abundant life to the lives of those who put their faith in him every day as they seek him. As Paul said, I just want to know him and that power. I want to keep knowing it more and more and more, and that's what it's going to provide. So the women are totally amazed by this, right? So then the angel says, go quickly and tell the disciples that he's risen from the dead, verse 7. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee, and you will see him. See, I have told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy. And they ran to tell the disciples, right? So, I mean, they're just all like, okay, we got to go. He said that he's going to meet us in Galilee, and we have to go tell the fellas, and then we're all going to do it, and it's going to be really great. And then in the middle of their journey back to tell the disciples, there's this little serendipitous verse. Verse 9. It says, and behold, Jesus met them. This is the only time in the Gospels that it said Jesus went and met someone. I'm not saying that he didn't bump into people, but most of the time it's, and a centurion met Jesus, and a woman met Jesus. And this is this rare instance where Matthew says Jesus goes out of his way to meet these two women, right? And then I love this. It says, and he says to them, greetings, which we might read this like, well, what was the tone? Was it like, howdy? You know, like how does he greet? Well, this word in its original language, which is the Greek language, is the word, it's a twist on the word for joy, right? So what he says is they're walking, we got to tell the fellas, and everything else, and then all of a sudden he just shows them, and he's like, joy! Right? Like, rejoice, this is great, give me a hug. I mean, that's the tone, that's the attitude. It isn't just, he's like, oh, it's not like that, right? There's a sense of, come here, right? It's finally happened. What you didn't think was going to occur has occurred. Come here, rejoice in this. Take great joy in what you see. And for these women, this would have been utterly overwhelming because they expected to see a dead man just moments before, and now he's very much alive. The other thing I love about this is, again, it's unexpected. The angel said, you're going to see him in Galilee, and then he pops in before that event. It's kind of like a VIP meet and greet, you know what I mean? And in particular, I think, to these women, because they were the ones that, again, like I said, all week were there. They just wanted to be there for him. Whether it looked like he was winning or losing, they wanted to be there with him. They just wanted Jesus. And I really believe that Jesus just kind of gives this little bit of extra, like, blessing and reward to these women because they're desperate seekers of him. I think that's true to all people. Jesus reveals himself in very blessed ways for those who are desperate for him. And so he shows himself to these women. He says, greetings, rejoice, take joy. And what do? They came and they took a hold of his feet and they worshiped him. And then Jesus says, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and then they will see me. It's a great scene, right? It's a great scene. And so the women, they go and they tell the disciples, and there's a lot of confusion and just kind of some derpiness, because honestly, the disciples have been like this flock of chickens, you know, like they've just struggled this week. You know, and so even up on the news, there's just all kinds of reaction and everything else and dialogue, and Matthew doesn't get into any of that. He kind of skips all of that, and he fast forwards to the rendezvous point, right? He does a little thing about what happens with the Jewish leaders and soldiers and everything else. We're skipping that and going right to the rendezvous, which is where Matthew picks it up in verse 16. So it says, and this is where it's critical, right? It says, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but, it says, some doubted. Catch that? So, the women come. He's alive. Everybody's scrambling. There's other things going on. Then finally they get to Galilee. They get there. Here's Jesus in all of his glory. It says they worship, but then there's some who are literally looking at Jesus and going, I don't know, man. I know this guy who knows a guy has a friend whose cousin is David Blaine, and he does this stuff too. You know, and even let's say we go with the theory that some people have that Jesus didn't actually die, that he was just in the tomb, very sick, wounded, worn out. They drag him out of the tomb. He's not going to look terribly fresh, right? He's going to be like propped up with a stick and pasty white and I'm still alive, but that's not the scene. I mean, the scene is, man, Jesus is healthy. He's risen. He has conquered death. And there's still people going, The question is why? Why? Why in the face of proof does there seem to be doubt? Is that possible? Can you have proof and still doubt? Sure. People do it all the time. People have proof all the time, they still doubt. For example, scientific proof says that frozen vegetables are actually more nutritious than fresh ones on the other side of the store. Right? It's proven. It's proven because they pick those and then they freeze them very rapidly. The stuff you get at the store on the other side, unless you're getting right from like the crop, it degenerates over the course of time, and they've proven that frozen actually has more nutritional value than fresh produce on the other side of the store. But you don't believe it even though I'm saying it right now. You're like, no, that's not how it works. I'm just telling you, yeah, that's how science says it. Right? It's proof, but you doubt the proof. Another thing, proven. Your cell phone is dirtier than your toilet. This is a proven fact, right? But you don't wash your hands before and after using your cell phone. You don't do that. I still watch parents when their kids are like bored at a grocery store or a restaurant. They hand the cell phone to the kid. The kid's gnawing on it. Like, just give the kid a toilet seat to gnaw on at that point because it's cleaner than your phone. It's proven, but you don't believe it. There's plenty of times we have proof and we don't believe it, and here's the reason. Proof does not generate faith. There is no guarantee that if something's proven to you, you will then place your faith in what is proven. See, faith is altogether different than just simply acquiescing to proof. There has to be a deeper catalyst. In fact, in Matthew chapter 16, it's an interesting story Jesus is telling. He says there was a rich man and there's a poor man. And then they both died, and the rich man went to hell, and the poor man went to heaven, and Abraham is in the midst of this story, and the rich man that is in hell says, I realize now that this place is not great. And so he makes a request. And he says, I beg you, Father, to send me to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, and I will warn them, lest any of them come to this place of torment. But then Abraham said, they have Moses and the prophets, let them hear that. And he said, no, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, here's what's important, but if someone goes to them from the dead, then they will repent. And he said, well, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should even rise from the dead. See, it's true even in the life of Jesus, even with people that are sympathetic to him, that when he's standing there before him, they don't necessarily believe, at least some of them, right? Because the faith that rises out of the reality of Jesus rising from the dead, that faith doesn't come just merely by acknowledgement of proof, right? I mean, if that was the case, then Jesus' opponents would have all believed, right? Because they actually paid to suppress the proof. They didn't deny whether it was true. They just didn't like the narrative. They weren't going to put their faith in the proof. They hated the proof and removed their faith and sought to repress and suppress the proof that was there. So proof does not necessarily generate faith. And anybody says, if I had more proof, then I would believe. There's no guarantee to that because you got Jesus standing right before disciples and they're not certain, some of them. So what generates faith if it's not proof? Well, faith in and of itself is a step of something where you have to trust beyond yourself. And I would say in the context of Jesus and his disciples here, the only way they're going to experience the fullness of what the resurrection isn't just merely in acknowledging the proof of the resurrection. It's going to be by acting on what the resurrection is designed to accomplish. What the resurrection is designed to do in the world and in their lives. That's the only way it's going to happen. Only then where they sense the power and the preservation and the potency and the presence of God. It's when they say, all right, Jesus, what do you want to do with this truth in me? Not just I acknowledge the truthfulness of it. So what is this truth that Jesus wants to fulfill through them? I take you back to Matthew chapter 28, right? It says in verse 18, after Jesus rises, shows, there's doubts. Then he tells them, well, listen, fellas, here's what you need to understand. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach them to observe all that I've commanded you, and behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. What converts their doubt, their timidity, and their impetuousness? It's not going to be, again, hey, we acknowledge the factualness of this. It's going to be when they say, all right, you've risen for a reason, and whatever that reason is, I want to move with you. I want to go where you're going. I want to do what you're doing. I want that life to be my life. I want your life to be my life. I want your purposes to be my purposes, and I step in faith in you, and I go, and I teach, and I baptize, and I invest because you have the authority, and I want that authority in my life, through your strength, and I want to do this for you. When that happens, that's when their faith grabs hold. That's what moves them into like the guys that show up to Acts chapter 2 and 4 and 5 and 9 and 19, where there's these massive movements where it's not just we believe the proof, it's no, we want the life of this God who has risen to be our lives. We take that act of faith and move on it. In fact, I'd say that it's only by acting on faith that you will sense him acting in you. By acting on faith, that's really when you're going to sense him acting in you. And so when he says, I have all authority, we go, he has authority. That's why I go. That's why I make. That's why I teach. Everything that he said is everything I want to know because that's what I'm supposed to share with others, right? And when you do that, man, then it's in your bones, it's in your gut, it's in your heart, it's in your life, it's in the contours of your decisions. All of that is going to be true. And that's why I say today we're not just celebrating some historic monument. It's not just this little sliver in the timeline that we're caring about, but it's something in the timeline that shapes everything when you act on it in faith. Right? In fact, Peter, in 1 Peter 3, gives us this encouragement and reminder. He says, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope, right? We don't have an ancient dead faith. We have a living hope through the resurrection, it says, of Jesus Christ from the dead to an inheritance. Right? So there's a sense in which we have this today. And so he's punched the ticket for us to have a fullness of life and an abundance of life. And he doesn't want you just to get through life. He says, if you want to have life truly alive, then live in the power that conquered death by my death and my rising. Again, it is a daily seeking. It is a daily desperation to want more. To press into him, to face the headwinds of life with a sense of optimism and belief in the fact that that same power that took Jesus from being a cadaver to being the risen Christ, that same power that worked in him can work through you. That's the point. Through you. That's what he wants to do in you every single day. And so, fueled by the final resurrection that's coming, and I would say inspired by the first resurrection that has come, we live today in that resurrection power. We live today with the reality that he has risen in life, he has risen in our world, and therefore he is risen up in you, and he's risen up in me. And his whole agenda is to continue to rise up in our lives and rise up in our hearts. Matter of fact, Peter says that in his second epistle, until the morning star arises in your hearts. That's what he desires to do. And so as we remember what he's done, we also recall what he's still doing. And so I encourage all of us today, we want to rise as he has risen. He has risen in our lives for a reason. So with that, we should rise. We should rise in joy, and we should rise in hope, and we should rise in determination, and we should rise in anticipation. We should rise expecting him to do something great. We should rise believing that his power is sufficient. We should rise believing that everything he does for a reason. Whether it's good or bad in our lives, it's all for good. So we rise in this concert that says he is always good, even when things are rough and bad, because he has beat the grave. He's conquered death. And so for all of that, let us rise together, for he is risen indeed.